Good morning, everyone. If you've noticed, my channel has changed name. So what's happened to Generation Exceptional? Well, let me tell you, I've changed it to Being Bev, and I'm going to explain in this video why I've made that decision. But if you're new around here, hello. This probably won't mean a lot to you, but I'm Bev and this channel is now Being Bev. And if you want to stick around and find out why, then you are more than welcome. But if you've been around here for any time at all and followed me at all, you will know that this channel has actually changed numerous times over the past 2.5 years or so since I set it up. And that's really because my life has changed a lot over those 2.5 years. And I feel as if the channel has kind of morphed with me. And it has had various different names in that time as well. And I retired at the beginning of this year and my whole life changed. And I've just gone through this period of not really knowing what to do with this channel. It started being sort of morphing into being about retirement and tips and things for retirement, and then I realized actually I don't like doing the tips and teaching type videos anymore. It was different when I was running my business, and you know, I'm an educator by trade and probably by personality. But when you're creating content that is all about teaching, it becomes less about you and more about the subject. And because my life does change constantly, everybody's life changes constantly, but I really feel that change. And because I have quite a short attention span, good old ADHD, I find that the things I want to talk about change regularly as well. And I did a video quite recently that was titled something like "No More Talk of Retirement," because I felt like I'd exhausted it. And then a couple of days later, I did a blooming video with my brother talking about his retirement, which was a bit ironic. However, I got some really lovely comments from that video from you gorgeous people out there saying, you know, just do whatever you want, create whatever you want. We will be interested to hear just what it is, you know, you're doing, things about your life, how, you know, it was so reassuring that people were saying, look, we'll just follow you and your story and your journey. And I think, like many people on YouTube, the problem is we don't think we've got very interesting lives. And most of us, quite frankly, most of the time, don't have very interesting lives. So talking about yourself and what you're doing day to day can actually start to feel a little bit challenging, because you think, oh, nobody's going to be interested in this. But the feedback that I got from that video was actually people may be interested. And I think about the way that I watch YouTube, and I watch a lot of people who aren't teaching me anything. They're not, you know, blowing me away with their profound, you know, prophetic comments. Prophetic, not pathetic. I just like watching them as a person and seeing their day to day. And I had this little bit of an epiphany, I think, yesterday, when I was, again, sort of journal in hand, thinking, what do I want to do with this channel? And I had some good conversations with my brother, who has got a couple of YouTube channels, growing YouTube channels. He's way more successful at this than I am. And I said to him, you know, I don't have a very interesting life. And he said, well, you've just flown 2,000 miles across to Cyprus on your own, and you're vlogging about it, and you're visiting a home that you lived here, you know, where you lived 25 years ago. That's not normal day to day for most people. That is a bit different. And you know, you've got your camper van and you're going and seeing places and you've retired early. None of these are necessarily the norm. So you do have interesting things to talk about, but when you're living them day to day, they don't feel that interesting. Anyway, going back to my epiphany and some of the comments that I had on my on my retirement video, where people were saying, just be you, just, you know, we'll follow you, just talk about you. And I had this idea of just being me, just be me. And being Bev was kind of what came into my head. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, that's all I really can be. And it suddenly sort of lifted, it sounds really silly, but it lifted a weight off me to try and be something that I'm not. And I think there's a danger with YouTube, and I genuinely, hand on heart, believe that, or hand on mic, because I've probably just knocked it, hand on heart believe that nobody really on YouTube is being truly and authentically themselves, and that is absolutely fine, because we're chameleons, aren't we? We're different people depending on the situation, depending on who we're with, depending on the relationship we've got with the person we're with. So that's not to say that people on YouTube are being inauthentic, more that we're not being fully and truly authentic. But I found that I was trying to make content that felt really inauthentic. Not that I was making anything up or lying in any way. It just didn't feel aligned to who I really was and what I wanted to create. And I watched a video by Rob the Maritimer, who I really like. I love, if you haven't watched him, he kind of helps people with their YouTube journey, and I really like him. And he gave the advice that you need to stop making content for yourself and make it for your audience. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. If your goal for YouTube is to grow a business, to make money, to grow a big sort of following, but if that's not the goal, and it's not my goal anymore, then maybe making content for other people isn't the best advice for me and my situation. Maybe the best advice I can give myself is to just make content that feels good for me and that reflects where I am in life. And the way I thought about this was, when I'm with friends, I don't feel I have to teach. I don't feel I have to try and inspire them. I don't feel I have to give them advice. I just share what's going on with me in my world. I'm just being Bev. And for me, what I want this channel to be is me talking to friends, sharing with my friends what's going on with me in my life now that I've moved into a different chapter of my life. Because I can't create a theme as such, because I don't want to be teaching. And I think if you're going to teach, you need a theme to teach. I just want to be hanging out with my friends. So if I can just share being Bev, just share being me with you, my virtual friends, that feels better. That feels a nicer way to come and create. It feels more inspiring for me to want to come and create content. And what that means is I'm not going to feel, at least this is how I think it's going to go. I'm not going to feel so constrained in the content that I can create, because I'm not sticking to any kind of theme or niche. Being Bev is the theme. Learning about myself as I go and sharing some of my experiences, the big and the small. You know, travelling across to Cyprus to see my brother on my own, that felt like quite a big experience. Making a junk journal and sharing that with you, probably not such a big experience, but they're all parts of who I am now when I'm being Bev. I hope that makes sense. And I was thinking, you know, it's Father's Day today, and I was thinking about my own dad, as I often do, and remembering something he said to me. Well, he didn't say it actually, he wrote it in the front of a book of mine, and I can't remember why, but he wrote it, and it wasn't a book actually, it was a little photo album. And do you remember when we used to print photographs? We used to go and get them printed at have them developed in a shop, and they'd send them to you. And I had one of these little photograph albums that I think I got as a free gift. I'm digressing a bit here, but anyway, I had one of these little free photograph albums, and I'd slotted all of my prints in, and a lot of them had my dad on them. And I was showing him, and he said, "Can I write a little note in the front of your book?" And I said, "Of course." And he wrote, "Traveller upon life's seas, to thine self be true, and where'er your life may lead, paddle your own canoe." And it stuck with me. I mean, my dad has been dead, since, 30 odd years now. But this paddle your own canoe has stuck with me all of these years. And I realised with my channel, I was not paddling my own canoe. I was trying to paddle somebody else's canoe. And paddling my own canoe is about doing the things I want to do my way. Not for an algorithm, not for monetization, not for subscribers, just because I'm being Bev. And if you want to come along and paddle alongside me, that would be absolutely brilliant. But we all need to paddle our own canoes. So there you go. That is why the channel is changing. You know, it was Generation Exceptional because, and that, to be fair, was a name change probably just a year ago. But Generation Exceptional was the name of my podcast when I first started my podcast 8 years or so ago. And I haven't produced a podcast episode for that podcast channel probably for about a year either. And it just felt outdated for me. I loved the name. I do remember thinking I was quite chuffed that I came up with that one. But it's outdated. It's not who I am or what I am anymore. And I felt like, you know, life needed to change and move on. I am a bit of a chameleon. I think that's an ADHD trait. I do tend to change and morph into different things throughout my life. I look at some people, some of my friends, and they feel like they've been the same person for many years. That's not to say they haven't grown, but just their personality type is sort of steady. They've had probably the same hairstyle for most of their lives. They've worn the same style clothes for all of their lives, and I haven't. You know, I look back over my life, and oh my word, it's like you could, you know, from one year to the next, I'm barely recognisable just because I changed my hairstyle, I changed my style, all sorts of things. I am a bit of a chameleon. And yet with YouTube, I've tried to suppress that side of me. And I don't know, I feel as if being Bev is just whoever I am in that moment. And it will change. You know, my life is changing. What I'm experiencing in life is changing, And as I say, I just want to share that as if I was sitting chatting to a friend, which I feel like I am when I'm talking on YouTube, even though I'm literally talking to the lens of a camera. But I feel like I want to just share my day-to-day, the highs, the lows, the funny bits, the sad bits, all the bits as they happen, as if I was just sharing it with a friend over a coffee. So I hope you'll stick with me and come along and paddle your canoe alongside me. But make sure you paddle your own canoe, not mine. And I hope it'll work for you. And of course, if it doesn't, then we'll be sad to say goodbye. But I have realised that for my personal circumstances, I think I have to disagree with good old Rob. And I don't disagree with much of what he says. I think in this instance, I don't think I want to make content purely for the audience. I want to make content for my friends that is about who I am. So anyway, that's my explanation of why we are no longer Generation Exceptional. We are now Being Bev. I hope you'll stick with me, and if you do want to stick around, if you are new here and you do want to stick around, please do me a favour and hit the subscribe button. That way it doesn't cost you anything. You will get notified when I post some more of my Being Bev content. And it also, obviously, it does help YouTube to kind of figure out who my content is likely to appeal to. And if you've enjoyed my ramble here, do me a favour, hit the thumbs up button. It's just another little indicator to YouTube that you've enjoyed my content. I will talk to you again very, very soon. Take care. Bye for now.